I never thought I'd be telling this story, but here I am. My name is Piper, and I was 24 when everything in my life turned upside down. Back then, I had what most people would call a pretty good setup, a steady job as a manager at a decent company, my own rented apartment, and a boyfriend I was head over heels for. Jake and I had been dating for 6 months, but it felt like we'd known each other forever. He was charming, successful, and seemed to tick all the boxes. We'd talk for hours about everything and nothing, planning our future together. Things were getting serious, and I felt like I was living in a dream. "I think it's time you met my family," I told him one evening as we were cuddled up on my couch, watching some forgettable Netflix show. "They're going to love you. Even my sister will have to admit you're perfect." My sister, Emma, was 22 and had just graduated from college. She was still living with our parents, trying to figure out her next move. We'd always been close growing up, despite the 2-year age gap, but lately, she'd been distant. I chalked it up to post-graduation stress and her job hunt frustrations. The dinner with my family was set for the following weekend. I spent hours getting ready, wanting everything to be perfect. Jake brought wine and flowers, making my mother beam with approval from the moment he walked through the door. "Oh, Piper," Mom gushed, pulling me aside in the kitchen, "he's absolutely wonderful. Such good manners, and so handsome too." I noticed Emma rolling her eyes and letting out a small snort from her place at the counter, but I ignored it. She was probably just jealous that I had my life together while she was still finding her footing. The evening went better than I could have hoped. Dad and Jake bonded over their shared love of golf, Mom couldn't stop praising his career achievements, and even Emma's attitude seemed to thaw slightly by dessert. As we were leaving, Mom hugged me tight and whispered, "Don't let this one get away, sweetheart." Within weeks, Jake and I were talking about marriage. It wasn't a traditional proposal, we just kind of fell into the conversation naturally one night over dinner. "We could do it in 6 months, he suggested, reaching across the table to take my hand. "Nothing too fancy, just family and close friends." My parents were overjoyed when we told them. They immediately insisted on paying for half the wedding expenses, with Jake's parents covering the other half. Emma sat quietly through the entire conversation, picking at her food and occasionally making these little huffing sounds that everyone pretended not to notice. The next 5 months were a whirlwind of wedding preparations. Every spare moment was filled with decisions about flowers, cake tastings, venue visits, and endless meetings with vendors. I was running myself ragged trying to balance my job with wedding planning, often staying late at the office to meet with our wedding organizer. That Tuesday started like any other. I had a morning meeting with the florist and was supposed to work late again to finalize the reception timeline with our coordinator. But around 2 p.m., I developed a splitting headache. My boss took one look at me and sent me home. I thought I'd surprise Jake. He usually worked from home on Tuesdays, and I figured we could order takeout and have a quiet evening together. Maybe he could help me with some of the wedding tasks that were piling up. The apartment was quiet when I unlocked the door, but I heard muffled sounds coming from our bedroom. I assumed Jake was on a work call, he often took them in there for better sound quality. I'll never forget what I saw when I opened that door. Jake and Emma, tangled in our sheets. My sister. My fiance. In our bed. Time seemed to stop. The world narrowed to that single moment, that single image that would be burned into my memory forever. Emma didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. She just stared at me with this almost bored expression, like I was interrupting something trivial. "Piper," Jake started, scrambling to get up. "Baby, I can explain." Something inside me snapped. Without a word, I walked to the closet, grabbed their clothes, and marched straight to our third-floor balcony. "Piper, don't," Jake called out, but it was too late. I'd already thrown everything over the railing, watching with grim satisfaction as their clothes scattered across the parking lot below. "Get out," I said, my voice eerily calm. "Both of you, now." Emma had to wrap herself in another sheet from our bed because all her clothes were now decorating the asphalt 3 stories below. The sight of her trying to maintain her dignity while shuffling toward the door in nothing but Egyptian cotton would have been funny if I hadn't felt like I was dying inside. As soon as they were out, I slammed the door and collapsed against it, sliding down to sit on the floor. I don't know how long I sat there, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The sun was setting when my phone rang. Mom's name flashed on the screen. For a moment, I felt relief. Surely she was calling to comfort me, to tell me everything would be okay. I couldn't have been more wrong. "How dare you humiliate your sister like that," she hissed as soon as I answered. "Throwing her clothes out the window? Making her walk out in a sheet? What were you thinking?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What was I thinking? What was she thinking? She was in bed with my fiance. "You're always so dramatic, Piper." "This is exactly why." "Mom," I cut her off, my voice stronger than I felt. "The wedding is cancelled. I'll contact the vendors tomorrow." "No, you won't," she interrupted, her tone unnaturally calm. "The wedding is still happening. Your father and I talked it over with Jake's parents. We spoke with Jake and Emma too. The wedding will proceed as planned. Emma will take your place." 5 words, 5 simple words that felt like a physical blow. I actually checked to see if I was bleeding. Surely something that painful must leave a mark. "You can't be serious," I whispered. That's insane. You can't just." "We've paid for half this wedding," Mom cut in sharply. "Jake's parents have paid for their half. Everything is booked and paid for. We're not throwing all that money away just because you're having a tantrum." "A tantrum?" My voice rose with each word. "My fiance and my sister were in my bed. How is that a tantrum?" "Piper," she sighed, like I was a child refusing to share my toys, "you need to grow up and stop being so emotional about everything. These things happen." The line went dead. I don't remember much of that night. I know I cried until I had no tears left. I know I screamed into my pillows until my throat was raw. I know I threw up twice, my body physically revolting against the betrayal. The morning sun found me curled up on the bathroom floor, still in yesterday's clothes. My phone had been buzzing periodically, but I couldn't bring myself to look at it. Finally, around 9 a.m., I saw my cousin Sarah's name flash across the screen. "Piper?" Her voice was hesitant. "I just got off the phone with your mom." She paused, and I could hear her struggling to find the right words. "She's been calling everyone in the family." My stomach dropped. "What's she saying?" "She's telling everyone that Jake broke up with you because he fell in love with Emma. She's saying it was all very civil and mature, but you're not handling it well." Sarah's voice got quieter. "They're telling everyone the wedding is still on, just with Emma instead." I closed my eyes, willing myself not to throw up again. "What else?" "They're telling everyone not to contact you for a while. They're saying you're behaving inappropriately and need time to process things properly." The bathroom tiles were cool against my forehead as I leaned against the wall. My entire family was being turned against me. My parents were painting me as the villain in their twisted narrative. They were protecting my sister, my cheating, betraying sister, while isolating me. Fury burned through me that morning, but it wasn't the destructive kind. I made my decision right there on that bathroom floor. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of a scandal. I wouldn't cry, scream, or beg. I would simply disappear from their lives as completely as they had erased me from theirs. The next morning, I walked into my boss Karen's office, before she'd even had her first coffee. "I need more work," I told her, standing straight despite my exhaustion. "The most challenging projects you've got." "I want them all." She studied me over her glasses. "Piper, you're already handling a full load, and with the wedding." "There is no wedding," I cut her off. "And I need to be busier. Much busier." Something in my expression must have convinced her because she opened her drawer and pulled out a thick file. "The Thompson account. Nobody's been able to crack it. It's yours if you want it. I found a new apartment that weekend, a small studio across town. I changed my phone number, blocked every family member on social media, and threw myself into work like it was the only life raft in an ocean of pain. The Thompson account? I cracked it in 2 weeks. The Impossible Miller project? Completed it a month ahead of schedule. Every challenge Karen threw at me, I conquered. I worked 14-hour days, took online courses at night, and studied our competitors like my life depended on it. Working was the only thing that kept me from thinking about them. About how Emma and Jake were probably living their happily ever after in the house we'd planned to buy. About how my parents were probably doting on their good daughter while telling everyone what a shame it was about their eldest. A year passed. I got promoted to senior manager. Another year, director of operations. By the 3rd year, I was the youngest vice president in the company's history. My salary tripled. I bought a gorgeous apartment in the city center, the kind of place Jake and I used to walk past and dream about. But I bought it on my own, with my own money, and every time I walked through those doors, I felt a fierce pride that had nothing to do with anyone else. I started traveling. First, small trips, weekend getaways to nearby cities. Then bigger ones. Paris in spring. Tokyo in fall. The Greek islands in summer. I posted photos of all of it on Instagram, not to show off, but to remind myself how far I'd come. 3 years. 3 years of not hearing their voices, not sitting at their dinner table, not knowing anything about their lives except the one fact I couldn't escape, that Emma had married Jake. I heard it from Sarah, who mentioned it casually during one of our rare text exchanges, probably testing to see if I'd react. I didn't. I was happy. Really, genuinely happy. Not the kind of happiness I thought I had with Jake, which was all about pleasing other people and fitting into their expectations. This was a deeper contentment, one that came from knowing exactly who I was and what I was capable of. Or at least, I was happy until my phone rang one ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I stared at the unknown number on my phone screen, debating whether to answer. Something made me pick up, intuition, maybe, or just morbid curiosity. Hello? Piper, my mother's voice. Sweetheart, is that you? The saccharine sweetness in her tone made my teeth hurt. She was speaking as if we'd just talked yesterday, as if nothing had ever happened. What do you want? I kept my voice neutral, professional, the same tone I used in board meetings. The fake cheerfulness in her voice cracked slightly. Your father and I need to talk to you. Could you come to the house? Please? We've had some serious discussions about everything. About you. I should have hung up. I should have blocked this number like all the others. Instead, I heard myself saying, when? Saturday? Around 6? I'll make your favorite dinner. Fine, I hung up before she could say anything else. The week crawled by. I threw myself into work even harder than usual, trying not to think about the upcoming visit. My assistant caught me staring at my calendar more than once, the Saturday appointment glaring at me like an accusation. When the day arrived, I spent an hour getting ready. Hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless, designer outfit carefully chosen. If I was walking into the lion's den, I was going to do it looking like someone they couldn't touch anymore. I drove my new Mercedes slowly through my old neighborhood, noting how little had changed. But when I pulled up to my parents' house, I barely recognized it. The place looked tired, worn down. The garden my mother had once prided herself on was overgrown, the paint was peeling, and the front steps needed repair. I didn't bother knocking, this wasn't a social call. The inside of the house hit me with a wave of memories I wasn't prepared for. The same furniture, the same photos on the walls, though I noticed they'd removed all the ones with me in them, even the same smell of Mom's vanilla candles. And there they all were, arranged like some twisted family portrait. My parents, looking older and more tired than I remembered. Emma, with 2 small children clinging to her legs, one looking about 2, the other barely a year old. And Jake, standing beside her with his hand on her shoulder, looking exactly the same except for a slight paunch around his middle. I waited for the pain, for the rage, for any of the emotions that had nearly destroyed me 3 years ago. But there was nothing. They were strangers to me now, as irrelevant as the peeling wallpaper behind them. Emma's eyes ran over my outfit, my bag, my carefully curated appearance. "You look good," she said, envy dripping from every word. I smiled, all teeth. Amazing what you can accomplish when you don't waste time plotting to steal other people's fiancés. "Piper," Mom's voice held that familiar note of disapproval. "Please, everyone, let's just sit down and have a nice dinner." I picked at the overcooked chicken on my plate, not really hungry but needing something to focus on besides the awkward silence around the table. The children, my supposed niece and nephew, were the only ones making any noise, the younger one banging a spoon against his high chair while the older one whined about his peas. Mom cleared her throat. "We've been following your success, Piper. Those photos you post, that apartment of yours looks absolutely beautiful. Right in the heart of downtown, isn't it?" I took a sip of water, not responding. "And your job, vice president?" "We're all so," she glanced at Emma, who was staring intently at her plate, "so impressed with how well you're doing." "Why am I here?" I put my fork down. "Because I know it's not to discuss my social media posts." Mom's smile faltered slightly. She pushed her food around her plate before speaking again. "Well, you see, things have been a bit difficult lately. Your father, why don't you tell her, dear?" Dad looked older than his years as he spoke. "I lost my job 3 months ago. Budget cuts. After 30 years with the company. I've had to pick up extra shifts at the hospital," Mom jumped in. "Just to keep up with the bills. The mortgage, utilities, everything's so expensive these days." I kept my face neutral, waiting for them to get to the point. "And of course, with Emma staying home with the kids," Mom gestured toward my sister, who was now trying to clean something off her younger child's face. "They're managing on just Jake's salary, but with 2 little ones." "What exactly does any of this have to do with me?" I asked, though I was starting to see where this was going. Mom's face brightened, apparently missing or choosing to ignore my tone. "Well, we were thinking. Emma really needs to find a job, but childcare is so expensive these days. And since you have such a flexible position." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. It didn't come. "Are you?" I started laughing, I couldn't help it. "Are you seriously suggesting that I should babysit for them?" "You have that big apartment," Mom continued enthusiastically. "And I'm sure you could work from home some days. The children are really very well behaved." The 2-year-old chose that moment to throw his sippy cup across the room while screaming at top volume. "This is a joke, right?" I looked around the table. "You're not actually asking me to babysit the children of my sister and my ex-fiancé?" "Well," Dad cleared his throat, "if you're not comfortable with that arrangement, you could help pay for a proper babysitter. Given your salary." I sat back in my chair, genuinely amazed at their audacity. They had ambushed me, invited me here, served me my mother's mediocre cooking, all to ask me to either play nanny to my sister's kids or open my wallet for them. "No," I said, standing up, "absolutely not. I will not be your babysitter, and I will not be your ATM." "Piper," Mom's concerned mask slipped, revealing the anger beneath. "How dare you be so selfish? After everything we've done for you." Dad slammed his hand on the table, making the plates rattle. "You ungrateful, greedy girl. You're sitting there in your designer clothes, living in your luxury apartment, while your sister can barely afford diapers." "My sister's financial situation is not my problem," I said, my voice ice cold. "You all made your choices 3 years ago. You chose her. You chose him. You made it very clear where your loyalties lay. Now you get to live with those choices." I walked out to the sound of their screaming, their voices following me down the driveway. Jake had the sense to stay quiet, but I could hear my parents calling me every name in the book while Emma wailed about her children. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The next morning, my phone started blowing up with notifications. Mom had posted a lengthy screed on Facebook about her heartless daughter who had forgotten her roots and abandoned her struggling family in their time of need. The comments started rolling in immediately. How could she be so cruel to her own sister? Those poor babies need their aunt. Money changes people. These were coming from relatives who knew what had happened 3 years ago. People who had seen the whole drama unfold. And yet here they were, piling on, sending me private messages about how I needed to get over it and help my family. I blocked them all, every single one. Aunts, uncles, cousins, they disappeared from my social media one by one. I didn't bother explaining or defending myself. They had chosen their side long ago. But my family wasn't done. I was in the middle of a meeting with our biggest client when my assistant burst in, looking panicked. "Miss Parker, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but your family is in the lobby. Your sister has 2 crying children with her, and your parents are demanding to speak to Mr. Davidson." I apologized to my client and rushed to the lobby. Sure enough, there they were, Mom and Dad making a scene at the reception desk while Emma stood there with both kids, who were screaming their heads off. People were staring. Phones were out, recording. "We demand to speak to whoever's in charge," Dad was shouting. "She can't treat her family this way. We'll see what her boss has to say about this." I walked up to the head of security, Marcus, who was already moving toward the situation. "Those people are not allowed in this building," I said clearly. "Please remove them." I watched as Marcus efficiently cleared them from the lobby, their shouts echoing off the marble floors. He came back to me afterward, looking concerned. "Would you like us to call the police, Miss Parker?" "No," I said, straightening my jacket, "just make sure they're on the banned list. They're not to be allowed in the building under any circumstances." They didn't stop. Somehow they got my new address. I came home one evening to find them camped outside my building's entrance. Emma was there with the kids again, using them as emotional blackmail while Mom and Dad tried to force their way in behind other residents. "We're not leaving until you help your sister," Mom shouted as I called building security. They showed up at random times after that, pounding on my door, screaming through it about family obligations and what a horrible person I was. I started taking different routes home, varying my schedule, looking over my shoulder everywhere I went. It was when they started contacting my colleagues and business associates that I finally broke. I'd been trying to handle it on my own, thinking they'd eventually give up, but they were escalating instead of backing down. I called my cousin Sarah, who'd remained neutral through everything, and asked for a recommendation. "I know a great lawyer," she said. "She handles family cases, restraining orders, that sort of thing. Her name's Michelle Torres." Michelle turned out to be exactly what I needed: tough, practical, and completely unfazed by family drama. She helped me organize everything: screenshots of every message, security footage from my building and office, witness statements from my doorman and colleagues, copies of their social media posts, records of every attempt they'd made to contact me after being told to stop. "We're asking for a restraining order," Michelle explained as we prepared for court. "They'll be legally barred from approaching you, your home, or your workplace. No contact through any means, physical, digital, or through third parties. And we're requesting $15,000 in damages for emotional distress and reputation damage." I wasn't prepared for how it would feel to see them in court. They looked smaller somehow, less threatening under the fluorescent lights. Emma had left the kids at home for once, though she still managed to cry on cue when called to testify. Their defense was weak. They were just trying to help their daughter reconnect with her family. They were worried about me. They just wanted me to see my nephews. The judge wasn't impressed. "The evidence of harassment is clear and substantial," he said in his ruling. "The restraining order is granted in full. The defendants are to have no contact with the plaintiff through any means, direct or indirect." The court awards the requested damages of $15,000. "This is ridiculous," Mom jumped up, screaming. "We're her parents. We have rights." "You ungrateful trash," Dad shouted at me. Emma dissolved into hysterics, wailing about her children again. The judge's gavel cracked like a gunshot. One more outburst and I'll hold you all in contempt. Furthermore, given your behavior in my courtroom, I'm adding a $5,000 fine for each defendant. That was 6 months ago. The restraining order works, they can't come near me, contact me, or post about me online. The damages and fines hit them hard financially, from what Sarah tells me, though I try not to think about them at all. I don't know what they're doing now. I don't know if Emma and Jake are still together, if the kids are growing up happy, if my parents have learned anything from all this. And the beautiful thing is, I don't care. I wake up each morning in my peaceful apartment, go to my job that I love, and live my life on my own terms. They say living well is the best revenge. But I'm not even interested in revenge anymore. I'm just living well, and that's more than enough.